Joining us right now to talk a little Texas and national political news, the co-founder of MustReadTexas.com, also GOP political strategist, is Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chad.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. Final time in 2014 as we look ahead to 2015. Let me ask you, let's start off in national news. The Marco Rubio versus Rand Paul on Cuba. This is sort of a preview for 2016 and just foreign policy in general, it seems, with Republicans and Rand Paul, correct?
Yeah, I mean, what strikes me about this is two things. I think one is, it is striking that Rand Paul is essentially siding with Obama. And it makes it difficult, to sort of agree with him on this and then criticize his foreign policy. As you look at Rand Paul on a lot of foreign policy issues, he is closer to Obama than he is to sort of the more conservative position. But second, the second thing that strikes me about this is that this is a great issue for Marco Rubio, for a lot of reasons. I mean, not just because, he's of Cuban descent. His parents are from Cuba and they emigrated, from Cuba. So this is a personal issue for him. But it's also good for him just because it reminds conservatives that he's a conservative. I mean, a lot of us sort of maybe wrote him off a little bit during the immigration debate in the Senate last year, 2 years ago. But, picking a fight as he thinks about running for president, on an issue where he is more conservative, than the person he's fighting with is very good politics for him. And I know that the overall politics of this issue, I think, are unclear. There's an argument that there's a generational element to this, that older Cuban Americans in Florida, want to keep the embargo, but younger Cuban Americans want to get rid of it. That seems to be the conventional wisdom. But I think, setting the politics aside in terms of how the issue plays out and just sort of analyzing it, this is a good fight for Marco Rubio to have.
Looking ahead on this, and Marco Rubio in 2016, there's a lot of back and forth between, it seems, the pundits who are out there about whether or not Marco Rubio is going to be hurt by Jeb Bush getting into the race. Those two have been close in the past. Is that going to affect, do you think Jeb Bush jumping into 2016, if he does indeed jump in, do you think that affects how Marco Rubio looks at 2016? Or do you think, hey, we're going to put friendships or, what used to be, allies aside and Rubio's going to be in as well?
Man, I really do think it affects Rubio in a direct way. When Jeb Bush was governor and Marco Rubio was Speaker of the House, Bush was Rubio's mentor. They've been friends for a very long time. But it's not just the friendship. I mean, it's also that it's hard to imagine the kind of major donor in Florida who would refuse to support Jeb Bush and instead support Marco Rubio. It just is very hard to imagine that kind of person. Yes, I'm sure those kinds of people exist because they've been longtime Rubio supporters or they're on his inner circle. But, you can't have a handful. You've got to have, dozens, if not hundreds of these bundlers. And if you aren't strong in your home state, you're not going to be strong nationally. And so to me, I just don't see how, Rubio can achieve escape velocity from a sort of political and financial standpoint in 2016 if Jeb runs. Rubio has said that he will either run for re-election or he will run for president. He will not do both. He is up for re-election in 2016. So he does face a choice. He is gathering his donors, I think, around January 23rd at a hotel in South Beach in Miami, and I'm sure he will get feedback from them about whether they would be with him if he were to run for president, if Jeb were also to run. But I just don't see how they both can do it. I really don't.
Well, and it's one of those where if you're Marco Rubio, you have so much time. You're young enough. You can wait. For Jeb Bush, he keeps dipping his toe into the water. Eventually, people are going to get tired of it if he doesn't eventually just run for president. So this might be one of those last times that he can sort of dance around it and not run. Right?
I think that's right. I mean, if you remember, even in 2008, there was chatter about Jeb running. Of course, he thought having the back-to-back Bush presidencies didn't make any sense, and he didn't run. But there was a lot of talk about him running in 2012, and I'm told that he regrets not running in 2012, that he feels he would have been a better nominee than Romney, and that election was winnable. And so, yeah, I do think, I think that's part of why he has moved as quickly as he has moved to send signals at this point, is that he's been ambivalent in the past. There's been questions about whether he has a fire in the belly. He hasn't been on a ballot anywhere since 2002. And while he did not take a sort of irrevocable step, he did take a public step that does freeze the field and freeze donors, brings the Bush network from out of the shadows and off the sidelines to his team, begins to lock down major players in Florida, in New York, and Texas, and puts a lot of pressure on the Romney team and also on Chris Christie. And so it's amazing how a Facebook post can shift the entire presidential race 2016, but that's what we've seen in the past 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. Matt, tell folks what they can find on mustreadtexas.com this week.
Yeah, looking forward to legislative session. Obviously, Abbott and Patrick are staffing up. Bills have been filed. We'll soon have committee chairs in the Senate. And so lots of legislation, kind of on tap as we look towards the major issues heading into legislative session and into the inaugural right after the first of the year. You can find all the top news around Texas at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, Matt, as always, thanks for joining us. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll visit with you again in 2015.
Same to you. Take care.
Thanks, Matt. That's Matt Mackowiak. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Mackowiak.